Kushtaka are an evil spirit known to the Lingit tribe of Juneau, Alaska. The spirits are thought to be otter men and can morph into otter, man, and monster in between. These creatures are thought by the natives to be the reason for the disappearance in the area known as the Alaska Triangle, a stretch of land where numerous travelers go missing every year. Since 1988, more than 16,000 people have gone missing in this remote part of Alaska. The Kushtaka or Kushtaka legend is as follows. If you're walking through the wildlands of Alaska, you will be approached by a man or group of men. They seem very friendly, kind, and come across as kinsmen. If you become lost or injured, these beings will appear and claim they are there to help you. Occasionally, Kushtaka will lure victims to them using the scream of a woman or the cry of a baby. After meeting with these creatures, they attempt to lead the victim deeper into the Alaskan wilderness. If successful, Kushtaka do one of two things. They either tear the person apart or turn them into a Kushtaka. This is believed to prevent the person's soul from reincarnating and causes them to be trapped as a Kushtaka. It's said that travelers are easily manipulated by the Kushtaka in otter form due to the cuteness and playfulness. To protect themselves, natives travel with dogs. It is said that the Kushtaka are terrified of dogs and will avoid them at all costs. One eyewitness claimed to have seen a Kushtaka late one night on a trail near his house in Juneau. He and his friends were simply passing time one Saturday night, the way high schoolers do. They grew bored of their activities and someone suggested a nighttime walk through the woods. Having spent plenty of time in the nearby woods and not being concerned about anything too dangerous as bears were hibernating, the group put on their clothes, made for 0-degree weather, and headed out into the cold night. The night was black and clouds blocked the moonlight. A very faint reflection of light was bouncing off the deep white snow on the train. The group could effectively only make out shadows. They crunched the snow as they made their way up the hillside until someone came running from the back of the group. When asked what he was doing, he claimed to have heard snow crunching behind him, lightly as if something was following them. Another jokes about it being a Kushtaka. After the comment, the group fell silent for a second, until Dunn managed to choke out that it was just a tale to keep children from wandering into the woods. Still unsettled, the group decided to head home as it was near 3 a.m. As the group slowly walked back, each looking intently into the woods, covering every direction, listening for something old, a baby's cry pierced through the night. The group set out dead sprint for the safety of the house. Once out of the woods, one turned back toward the tree line. What he saw was like no creature of nature. It was 5 feet tall and stood on its hind legs. It looked a bit like an otter, but things were askew. It had large patches or thick brown fur, but where the fur was missing, the monster had black leathery skin. It had almost human-like hands covered in the same black skin, with spindly and bony fingers which ended in large claws. Its teeth were long and sharp, and eyes were bright, burning yellow. With a wretched shriek, the creature fell on all fours and sprinted towards the group. They made it to the house with the boy that stopped to look back further behind the rest. The others claimed the monster was right on his heels by the time they slammed the door shut. Each of them peered out the windows by the door to see the creatures stalking back and forth in the front yard, until a loud bark broke through the night air. With that, the beast's head rose quickly and looked for the dog. It broke into a sprint for the woods, and that's when the boys knew they had been hunted by the Kushtaka. This next story comes from the Smithsonian Institute Bureau of American Ethnology. Tlingit myths and texts collected in Sitka and Wrangell in 1904, published 1908. There was a great famine at Sitka, and all the people went halibut fishing. Then a certain man went with his wife to the mouth of Redoubt Bay. He had prepared barks some time before, and when they got to this place, they made a house out of them. They fished there for a long time, but caught no more than 1 or 2 halibut a week. By the end of 2 months, they had little to live on except shellfish and other things picked up at low tide. One evening, they caught a small halibut at their fishing ground. They cooked a piece of it and put the rest on the drying frame in the brush house, and the man had constructed outside. Next day, they heard a noise there, as if something were being thrown down and moved about. The woman said, "What can that be?" Then her husband went out and was astonished to see 2 medium-sized devilfish lying there. He wondered how they had gotten up from the beach. Then he went in and said, "Wife, I am in luck. There are 2 large devilfish out there. I do not know who brought them. Tomorrow morning we will take them and see if we cannot catch some halibut. The person who brought them here is very kind, for I have been hunting everywhere vainly for bait." The woman sat down and considered. She said, "Do you know who brought them here?" He said, "No." Then she said, "I will tell you who brought them here. Don't you remember that my son was drowned a year ago, and no one has seen anything of him since? It must be he, who has taken pity on us because he sees how poor we are. I will call his name if I hear anyone whistle tomorrow or any other night, for I know it is my son." So the woman spoke. In the morning, they went out with these devilfish and caught 2 halibut. Evening came on. After they had reached home and it was dark, they began to cook some halibut. Just as the woman was putting some into the pot, a person whistled behind the house. Then she said, "We have longed for you, my dear son. Come in. Don't whistle around us. We have been wishing for you for the last year, so do not be afraid. It is only your father and I. Come in." Then it whistled again. The man went to the door, opened it, and said, "Come in, my son. I think you have come to help us because we are very poor off here." "The door is open. Come right in," so the father said. And without their seeing him enter, all of a sudden he was seated opposite them with his hands over his face. Then they spoke to him, saying, "Is it you, my son?" He only whistled by drawing in his breath. That was the way he spoke to them. Toward midnight, he began to speak. The father said, "Is it you, my son?" The land otter man, Kushtaka, said, "Yes." He motioned to them that there was something outside which he had brought for them. It was more devilfish. He said, "In the morning we will go out." The woman gave him a pillow and 2 blankets for the night, and he slept on the other side of the fire. So early in the morning, that it was yet dark, he took his father by the feet and shook him, saying, "Get up, we will go out." He told him to take his fishing line, and they carried down the canoe. Then the land otter man stepped in, and his father followed. His father gave him a paddle. The canoe went flying out to the halibut ground. It was his son's strength that took them there so quickly. Then the land otter man suddenly stopped the canoe. He took the line and baited a hook with 1 devilfish tentacle. He baited all of the hooks and lowered them. Then he tied the end of the line to the seat. He said to his father, "Put the blanket over you. Do not watch me." His father did so, but observed him through a hole in the blanket. The land otterman, without causing any motion in the canoe, jumped overboard, went down the line, and put the largest halibut that he could find on their hooks. When he came in, he shook the canoe, and his father pretended to wake up. He gave the line to his father, who began to pull up. Very many big halibut began to come up, which he clubbed and threw into the canoe as fast as he could. Then he turned the canoe around and started for home. The canoe was full. On the way, the land otterman was in the bow holding a spear. After he had held it there for a long time, he threw it. His father could not see that he had thrown it at a large seal. He brought it close to the canoe, gave it one blow to kill it, and threw it into the canoe. When they came ashore, it was almost daybreak. Then, motioning to his father that the raven might call before he reached shelter, he ran straight up into the woods. Now the man's wife came down and began cutting up the halibut. By the time they had it all into the house, it was dark. The same evening, before they knew it, he was with them again. Then the man took some pieces of raw halibut, cut them into bits, and placed it before him. He turned his back on them and ate very fast. He could eat only raw food. About a week later, they told their son not to go into the woods at night, but to stay with them. So he did. When he wanted to go fishing, he would awaken his father while it was still dark, and they would start off. Each time they brought in a load of seal, halibut, and all sorts of things. They began to have great quantities of provisions. After that, they began to see his body plainly. His mouth was round, and long hair had grown down over his back to his buttocks. He took nothing from his father and mother but raw food. Sometime after they began to pack up to come to Sitka, he now talked to them like a human being and always stayed with them. He helped load their canoe, and his father gave him a paddle. Then they set out, the land otterman in the bow, his father in the stern, and his mother between. When they came to the Pavaratni point, the woman saw the shadow of her son's arms moving, his hands, which held the paddle, being invisible. She said to her husband, "What is the matter with my son? He does not seem to be paddling. I can see only his shadow now." So she moved forward to see whether he was asleep or had fallen into the water. Her son was not there. The blanket he had around his knees was there, but he was gone. She said to her husband, "Your son is gone again." And he replied, "I cannot do anything more. He is gone. How can I bring him back?" So they went to Sitka. When they came to Sitka, they reported all that had happened. The father said, "My son helped us. Just as we got around the point, he disappeared out of the canoe. So his friends gave a feast for him. Alice's father, his name was Saki, and the place where they fished for halibut is now called Saki Ide." Ooh, what's going on, everybody? Appreciate you guys stopping in for another episode. This Kushtaka, it's pretty crazy. A lot of these native stories are pretty awesome. Otterman seems kind of funny, right? Considering we've all seen what otters look like, and they're extremely cute and stuff. It's hard to imagine that they could have like an evil side where they rip people apart and stuff. But this was a great episode, some great stories, because right, the first one was more of like the evil side of it, how they lure people out and kill them, turn them into one of them, stuff like that. But then on the other hand, you have one like this where it was obviously helping out his parents. They were having a hard time, so it obviously tends to show up during times of hard times, right? Famine, or people are lost out in the woods or whatever. So that seems to be kind of like the common theme between the stories. But like I mentioned, one of them obviously is more of an evil side, and then the other one's a good side. So it's interesting. If you guys have any more, any kind of information about this, I'd be interested to hear about it. Um, the Alaskan Triangle is another mystery in its own that I'm going to be probably doing episodes about as well. So that's good because a lot of crazy stuff happening out there. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, if you guys like the episode, give us a thumbs up. We'd really appreciate it. Subscribe if you aren't already a subscriber, and be watching out for new episodes of the Truth Defender podcast that are coming down the pipe. Really appreciate you guys. Stay safe out there, stay blessed, and most of all, stay frosty.